Hello and welcome to our webcast. I'm Amy Pendergrass with Moss Adams, and I'm going to get us started for today's session, Construction Contract Controls for Healthcare Projects. We're pleased that you joined us today, and before we begin, I'm going to play our housekeeping video.
Welcome, and thanks for joining. We're pleased to present our continuing professional education webcast series. Before we begin, please keep the following in mind. You can customize how you view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top right of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons that relate to a different aspect of our session. You can download a PDF of today's slides from the Slide Deck and Handouts widget. You can ask questions by typing in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. Today's session offers 1 CPE credit. To receive credit, you must meet the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy requirements. You must attend at least 50 minutes of the session and respond to at least 75% of polling questions. To participate in the polls, please check the button next to your answer within the slide window and click Submit. We'll track your progress and alert you when you've earned CPE credit. You can then click the certificate icon in the CPE Progress widget and download your CPE certificate. Don't worry if you can't download your CPE certificate today. We'll email you a copy in 2 weeks. If attending this webcast in a group, you must complete our group CPE attendance sheet, available in our Slide Deck and Handouts widget to receive credit. Please have all group members sign it and send only 1 sheet per group. CPE credit can only be awarded to participants registered as themselves and isn't available for participants who view the on-demand version. This presentation is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
All right, we have a couple of great speakers with us today from Moss Adams. We have Steve Bacchetti, partner, and Charnee Foston, senior manager. They are both part of our construction projects advisory practice, and their bios and contact information are in your webcast console for your convenience. And now I'd like to turn it over to Steve to get the presentation started.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Bacchetti. I lead our capital projects advisory team at Moss Adams. We are very excited to be presenting today on construction contract controls for healthcare projects. We hope you find the information helpful for your organization. As noted before, please send your questions our way throughout the presentation. We'll do our best to answer at the end of the session or follow up directly afterwards. Also, as many of you know, Moss Adams is a big national, international CPA firm. What some people do not know is we're one of the largest consulting practices out there for all CPA firms. Within our consulting practice, we have a major healthcare consulting practice, which we have slides on the total overview at the end, but includes services such as strategy, performance operations, reimbursement, compliance, etc. Construction auditing and advisory services are a piece of that, which we'll be focusing on today. During today's agenda, we'll be learning about the state of the construction industry. We'll be identifying key construction risk areas and common exposures, understanding how construction contract types impact auditability, identifying ideal timing and strategy for effective audits, and understanding primary construction cost components. So the state of the industry, as many of you are aware, contractors and project owners are scrutinizing projects more closely due to funding availability or new type of funding that are coming online. We're still facing high inflation, rising interest rates, thinner profit margins, and volatility on the return on investment from the project owner side. Infrastructure continues to age, so getting it up to compliance is an ongoing need. from the pandemic, we're still seeing increased skilled labor shortages. And this applies for both the construction industry, and we're also seeing situations within healthcare where, for example, nursing is an ongoing issue. And we're seeing organizations having to build temporary housing to meet the demands of that organization. So we're kind of seeing it on both fronts. Market conditions continue to impact pricing estimates, cost escalations, long lead time, supply chain issues are continuing to be a factor. So understanding your material specifications, making sure that you kind of have those contingency material specifications to support those longer lead items so you don't impact schedule continues to be a focus. Continued investment in and utilization of technology to increase efficiency, and then a focus on the ESG and sustainability efforts continues to be top of mind for our clients. And we are at our first polling question. I'll pass it over to Amy.
All right, thank you, Steve. So the first polling question is, does your healthcare organization's audit plan include audits for construction projects? And then your options are yes, currently ongoing, yes, planned for next year, no, no active construction underway, or no, have not considered audits for construction projects, or not applicable. And the polling questions are located right on the slides that we're presenting. So if you can't see it, you're going to just need to hit the F5 key to refresh your console. All right, it looks like people are responding pretty quickly. Make sure to hit the submit button once you select your answer. All right, here are the results.
Yep. So I think if you have a major capital project, definitely construction audits are a great tool. And we hope, again, that the information today will be helpful for your organization. All right, I'll pass it over to Charnee.
Thanks, Stephen. So I wanted to highlight, and I won't read all of this information to you, the common construction program exposures. So a lot of times what we hear from our clients in the healthcare industry, as well as other industries that we serve, are, we're behind schedule, we're over budget, we don't know exactly where we're at with our construction costs, we don't know how much this will cost at the end. Our stakeholders are, asking a lot of questions, or they're unclear as to, the status of the project. So those are some things that we very commonly see, and hopefully things that you're not experiencing at your own organization, but that this presentation will help you kind of clarify how to assess some of these different areas. So some common project risk factors that we also see. So organizations are typically not building every day, unless you're in commercial real estate or you're a developer or something of that sort. So healthcare organizations, like Stephen was saying, for either temporary housing or additional long-term care, facilities for aging generations, new hospitals, new acute care facilities, all of those things are, required due to just the aging population and the current kind of environment that we're all working in. And so typically a healthcare organization doesn't build every day. And so depending upon like the size or complexity of their program or their specific project, the type of contract that they enter into with their general contractor and their subcontractors, how they monitor and report on their project progress, all of those different factors can play a key role in the success of a construction project. We have polling question number 2. Amy?
All right, thank you. So the second polling question is, what concerns you the most about your healthcare organization's construction projects? And then your options are budget, schedule, scope or change orders, compliance, all of the above, or none of the above. And just a reminder, if you would like to receive CPE credit for today's webcast, you will need to respond to at least 3 of the 4 polling questions. All right, we'll do 5 more seconds and then we can pull up the results. There you go.
Okay, so 51% say all of the above. That would also be my answer as well. Definitely all critical factors that can impact your project and your organization as a whole. Stephen.
All right. And I totally agree. We live in this world, so we see any of those factors really, if you get 1 out of the 4 to the 5 right and you get 1 wrong, things can really escalate. So it's really important to have all those considerations built into your risk management strategy. All right. When we go to any organization, these are common questions we'll ask to get a better understanding of the various risk factors and controls supporting your organization. We'll, for example, understand the different contract types being utilized, which we'll cover shortly, whether it's lump sum or GMP with auditability requirements. How do you procure those types of contracts? What's your process from going from schematics, design documents to construction documents? What are the control built into the contracts and within your organizations, whether it's roles and responsibilities, authorization thresholds, et cetera? How do you monitor performance of the project throughout? What are the controls maybe to identify long lead items that aren't being delivered, which is going to impact schedule, and how's that being reported to the appropriate stakeholders? So these are I won't go through all of these, but you can see that these are great conversation starters, whether you're in accounting or in facilities or internal audit, that you can ask these types of questions to get a better understanding of who's in charge of what, where are the policies that define that, what are the controls in place to mitigate risk within your program. And these are the various contract types we see: lump sum, fixed price, time and material, cost plus, guaranteed maximum price contract. Our favorite contract for projects in excess of $1 million or so is the guaranteed maximum price contract. And what that allows you to do is to come up with a contract guaranteed maximum price. And then we'll recommend strong cost of work definitions, which we'll go into a little bit more in detail, so that one, you can control allowable versus unallowable cost. And if the cost is less than the guaranteed maximum price, those savings are realized by you and maybe the contractor, depending on a savings split clause built into the contract. Lump sum can be an effective contract type with strong procurement controls, making sure that it's competitive. Time and material is sometimes necessary, but it's generally for very small types of work, but require a lot of owner supervision. So we like going through these different contract types so that when you look at your organization and you evaluate what contract types are being used, if you have a multi-million-dollar project and it's lump sum, you may be, even with strong procurement controls, you may be paying more than you need to be for that specific project. So we like guaranteed maximum price contracts. All right, and on to our third polling question. Over to you, Amy.
All right, thank you. The third polling question is, what contract type does your healthcare organization use for managing major capital projects? And then your options: lump sum, time and materials, cost plus, guaranteed maximum price, not sure, or all of the above. And while you're responding, I do want to let you know that you have the option to submit questions for the presenters via the Q&A window. I do see some already coming in. Our plan is to carve out some time at the end to answer these questions. So feel free to submit as we go. All right, here are the results.
All right. So the not sure, I think that's a great starting point if you do have active projects and you're trying to understand the risk or controls within your organization. Understanding the various contract types would be a great starting point. All right, over to you, Charnee.
Perfect. So typical areas of a construction contract that we would always look for as auditors and consultants would be surrounding the cost of work definitions. This will define everything that is allowable and unallowable project costs, equally as important. So typically your allowable cost controls will include things like terms around labor types that are allowable, whether those are billed, at actual cost or if they're set with specified rates that are in the agreement. What are the allowable labor burden components? What are the other general conditions that are allowable? So think of trailers at the site, trucks, computers, technology, things of that sort. Obviously, subcontracts will be included within your cost of work, any owned or rented equipment, terms and conditions on change orders, what's allowable, what's not allowable, what are the markup percentages. Same thing with insurance and bond. What are the terms around that? Is that a percentage base? Is it based on the actual cost that's incurred? And then kind of most importantly, the right to audit clause. So that allows you as a project owner to audit your contract and your project. So that means whether you're, contracted directly with subs or if you have a contract with a general contractor or CM firm, that gives you the ability to open up those books and look at what costs they're actually incurring. So we're going to go through each of these areas pretty quickly because we could talk about it for quite a long time. So fees and general conditions. Fee is typically specified either as a fixed amount or as a percentage of the contract value. From a control standpoint, we like to see fee excluding things like insurance, permits, bonds, taxes, and any additional fee on self-performed work, which we will talk about a little bit more in detail later. So fee for a general contractor or a CM firm, that is their source of profit. And so adding it on top of items such as like insurance or permits, while those might be part of the cost of work, that's not actually something that they are having to necessarily like administer or anything like that. So additional fee for them is purely profit-based. And if you don't have, the right controls around, say, insurance or bonds and how those are to be billed to the job, you may be paying, an escalated value for the insurance and bonds, as well as paying that additional fee on top. So we generally just, advise people to exclude that. From a GC standpoint, like I said, that includes, trailers, vehicles, safety gear, all of those items that they're going to need to perform work on the site. Generally, construction contracts include language about what's allowable and unallowable for offsite personnel. As a construction contract control, we always advise having the owner's written approval for any personnel who are working offsite, understanding, what their function is, what percentage of their time is spent supporting this project, and what specific costs related to them will be allowable. Making sure that those costs are supported with obviously receipted invoices. And then one thing that is often missed is actually getting proof of payment for those costs. We have seen, on projects in the past where invoices are included within the project cost. And then when we look at, a detailed cost report to support charges for the job, we don't see that was actually paid by the contractor. So essentially that would be an unallowable cost if your contract is written as so. And then the last item, so allocations are very common for general contractors. We see it a lot for things like cell phones, insurances when they have an overarching company-wide policy. We'll see it sometimes for like vehicles, housing allowances, things like that are more general to them in nature. And so contracts are typically not written with the best controls in that area, and they don't specifically call out allocations as unallowable. We would always recommend, and we always review it from the lens of what did the company actually incur, and then what supporting documentation do they have to show that they incurred that cost. A great example is, we worked with a healthcare organization. They were in a remote location, and a lot of the personnel from the general contractor had to either travel a decent distance or they were temporarily relocated. So the contract required that the contractor provide, their housing allowance and travel and expense reimbursement policy. When we looked at that policy and compared that to the project charges, there was a very obvious inconsistency between what their standard policy was as a corporation and what they were charging to the job. So that's just an example of where we've seen that from an audit lens. Stephen, do you want to talk labor and burden?
Sure. All right. So we see two methodologies for GMP contracts with cost of work definitions, and it's either actual cost or stipulated rates. We like understanding what the actual fee percentage is. So we will generally recommend actual cost be the basis for the rates being charged to the project, with not to exceed limitations on burden components, with clear definitions of what's included in burden and not included in burden. For example, the FICA food SUDAs, the healthcare and benefits, clear definitions on whether PTO and holiday and sick days are included or excluded, bonuses, etc. So making sure that you have a clear understanding of what's in the fringe, what's not in the fringe, and kind of having those caps within it. Stipulated rates are also a common labor type or methodology that we see. The risks include potentially having excessive profit within those. So it can potentially be an area of profit in addition to the stated fee that was procured. So if you do stipulated rates, ensuring that you have market competitive checks confirming that the rates are in aligned with market so that you're not paying more than you need to. Other areas that we like is defining what's an allowable labor type within the contract. So this is ensuring that you're not including maybe corporate overhead type personnel within the project, because that should be covered within the fee. So having a table saying, hey, these are the types of personnel that are allowed on this project, and then having those rates either defined as actual costs or stipulated within it with kind of the fringe allowability. Another area that we see often is having a clear understanding if it's a salaried personnel or an hourly. So if it is a salaried personnel, you would not be, you would have clear definition saying for salary, we will pay up to the 40 hours per week and not more, so that it's not an additional profit center. And then having clear definitions on overtime, double time. So this is an area that let's say, for example, you're using stipulated rates and you don't have clear controls over the overtime, double time, which generally we'll recommend having owner written approval before incurring, just so you have visibility to what the root cause of the overtime is. But making sure that you have those controls in place so the visibility is there at the corporate level for those types of charges. In addition, for union or hourly craft laborers, we generally like tying it to the union agreements so that there's not a potential profit center there in terms of hourly craft laborers is stipulated at X, but when you go to the union agreement, it's a lesser value. So those are just some common areas in recommendations for labor. Self-performed subcontracts and related party transactions. So for both, we like clear definitions that if they are doing these, which may be totally appropriate and cost efficient for the owner, that you get the owner approval for it. We like providing not to exceed limitations when these are occurring. So if it's, let's say they're using their contractor owned rental yard, or they're using a internal supply kind of warehouse that they get the volume incentive, that's good. But making sure that you have those related party transactions approved by the owner, and then have a cap on those for the project so that you're not paying them more than they need to. Other areas is making sure that you get competitive bids. So we often see, for example, a contractor is great at concrete and they can manage that process effectively within the construction program. They can do it cheaper against third-party competitors. And that could be great for your project, but making sure that it's competitive is critical. And then ensuring that you have a separate contract or not to exceed limitation on that, so that you have that contract separated as you would like any third party. In addition, we like the same auditability requirements if they are doing the self-perform, so that, again, you have the visibility and you're not paying more fee than you need to. We're not trying to take fee away from anyone, but we want to make sure that you're paying the fee amount that was procured on that, in that competitive environment. And with that, I will pass it back over. Or I got equipment. Or Charnee, go ahead.
But I have one addition for the self-performed work. So we like to see self-performed work costs separated when we're looking at a job cost report. And even when you're looking at backup documentation within a payment application. So split out any, let's say you have a contractor who is self-performing concrete as well as being, your GCCM. So when they submit their payment application, also have them submit a separate payment application for their concrete self-performed, like you would any other trade contractor. That really helps to separate and show where the funds are going, because oftentimes what we see is money will be kind of funneled through. If you have, let's say, like a lump sum concrete, let's just keep with that. If they're performing lump sum concrete work, we'll start to see money funneled from, the GMP to that lump sum contract. And because of the limited auditability of that type of contract, we don't really get to see, what is that cost for? Was it actually incurred? Is that actually necessary? Or is that a way of taking what would be owner savings from the job and giving it to the contractor? So that is very critical with the self-performed work. In addition to, like we said earlier, limiting the self-performed work fee to just that contract specifically and separating that from your overarching contract fee, because if they're funneling money from one place to another and then adding additional profit on top of it, that can escalate very quickly and get out of hand for you as an owner.
I can agree more. So great point, Charnee. And a good way to control that, which is tying the labor discussion, is when you have the self-performed contract, have those clearly identified labor types and employee names, for example, is an easy way to say, hey, this is the self-performed contract. This is how we're tracking progress and performance here. Here's the prime. And I think Charnee made an amazing point that keeping the contract separate, cost reporting separate, so that you can track performance separate on a standalone basis. Okay. And Charnee, am I doing equipment, or do you want?
You can do it. It's me though.
Okay. It's one of my favorite cost types.
Go ahead. Have at it.
Okay, cool. So contractor owned. So equipment can either be contractor owned or rented from a third party. We see a lot of major capital projects are being performed by larger, mid to large general contractors. Often the case, general contractors will have a owned equipment yard, which I think can be very beneficial for the contractor and the healthcare organization. They have the equipment yard. They generally have kind of that scheduling, tracking, so they can get the equipment when they need it. I think there's a lot of benefits to contractors having the option of using their own equipment. But it's important for both at the beginning of the project, understanding what the equipment plan is. Is it third party? Is it owned? And understanding whether, one, you should be purchasing the equipment or renting it throughout the project. So a lot of healthcare organizations, they're major projects. They can be hundreds of millions or billions. So it could often be a cheaper alternative to purchase some of the equipment types for the project. You may not want it at the end, but you could sell it and kind of build that into your contract terms. So once you get past that of the buy, sell, lease analysis, and you get to, okay, this is the third party plan, here's the owned equipment plan, and you have kind of those considerations capped on a not to exceed basis, establishing the rates is important. So generally what we'll see is during contract negotiation, you create a table saying, hey, just like labor, these are the allowable equipment types. These are the allowable quantities. Here's our justification on why these are market competitive within the market. So generally we'll get contractors providing third-party rate quotes from your geographical location to demonstrate competitiveness. In addition, we like having those fair market value caps defined in the contract and reported at that time. And what that does, for example, if a piece of equipment, you have that monthly rental amount and you have a cap, and I'm making this up, 75% of what you could purchase it for, then they cannot charge you for more than that because it would have been more advantageous for you to purchase it. So these types of strategies and controls can be built into the contract. Generally, contractors are more than happy to have these all defined and have the reporting available to make sure that they're meeting the contractual requirements. But this allows you to kind of control that cost area where it doesn't get excessive, and you kind of have that early decision making, making sure that you're making the best possible investments for your organization. Other areas, if there are equipment that they need to add, just kind of have that owner approval requirement built in the contract. If they're going to add equipment, all good. Just making sure that they get owner written approval with that same playbook that we outlined before. And then clear definitions of, does your equipment include maintenance? Does it include insurance? Generally, if it's a third-party quote, you can say, hey, yeah, third-party quotes include maintenance and includes insurance, and that will be your basis for establishing that rate table. So having those third-party market quotes can be a great tool, making sure that you're not paying more. And same with kind of the software costs. We'll sometimes see software charges or computers, for example, being built into the rate schedule. Just making sure that you have a clear understanding of, is this directly associated with the project? Is this your asset? was the software needed specifically for your project, or is this more of a corporate allocation? So having those kind of clear cost work definitions saying, hey, these are what's included in the rates. These are components that are not included in the cost of work that they should be included in fee are easy clarifications up front. But if you don't clarify it within the contract, it could cause a gray area within the project. So getting those flushed out early is a great approach. And then finally, just making sure it's supported. So I think if they are using owned equipment, for example, we see a lot of our clients, they have web cameras, for example, where we can actually see the equipment's on site. If it's idle, for example, you may want a separate rate for equipment that's idle. And then if they are doing the third party, making sure that just like any other invoice, they're providing the cost substantiation, the proof of payment, etc. And with that, I think I'm passing over to Charnee.
Perfect. So change orders, allowance usage, contingency usage, these are some of the most critical components of any project. So from a contract standpoint, what we always like to see is a very clearly defined process. So, going from RFIs to change order requests to proposed changes to inclusion within like a prime contract change order. I'll even throw in submittals to the extent that they impact the change process. So having that very clearly defined, who needs to approve at what stage, having very clear thresholds as far as who can approve up to what value, specifying all of that at the onset of a project lets contractors know that A, you guys are paying attention, B, you guys have set, specific expectations of what you're expecting, and then C, it really helps just to streamline the entire process. I know when I work with healthcare organizations specifically, a lot of the changes are sometimes end user or like stakeholder based. So building a new hospital or a new surgery center, and, physicians think that you should have this here, but it was spec'd out to be, on the other side of the hospital, or something that won't work for you, maybe in like an emergency or acute situation. And so making sure that there's also a specified internal process for you as an organization of involvement of key stakeholders early and often, and then what that process looks like for when changes are proposed or are needed based on, basically practical use and application. As far as the supporting documentation for changes, we like to see, and we recommend that, within contracts, everybody clearly specify the level of supporting documentation that's required. Cost quotes, are great to the extent that, work has already been performed, which it does happen on occasion. You would want to see actual cost report for those. You'd want to see, daily reports, daily T&M tickets related to the work that show the labor and show the material that was used. Definitely not preferred if you're signing change orders after the work has been performed, but we know that does happen. From a proposed change order standpoint, making sure that you're not just getting information from your construction manager, but they're also getting that subcontractor backup for quotes from the vendors themselves, and making sure that those are actually itemized. So not saying, it'll be $2,000. I want to know if that $2,000 is related to labor, materials, equipment, if there are any exclusions from that, just making sure that it's very clearly specified and signed off by both parties for inclusion within, an owner change order. One of the items that we always look at as part of reviewing prime contract change orders is ownership and accountability. So changes could be, the result of changes in design. It could be, an unforeseen condition, something we didn't know about until we got, well into the construction, or it could just be an issue with constructability itself that came up at a later point. Those are very common, as are the user requested changes in a healthcare environment specifically. Items that you shouldn't see as part of a change is an error by a subcontractor or something that should be back charged between subcontractors. If there was an omission by the architect or engineer on the job, there are different remedies for that won't cost you as an owner, assuming that you have those correct protections built into your contract. And then just making sure that all the parties are signing off on changes. So owner, architect / engineer, and the general contractor. So that way, everybody is working from the same set of documents. Everybody, clearly understands what the scope is, and that will eliminate kind of the back and forth later. And if something goes to, litigation or claim or something like that, you have the documentation to clearly support, everybody's agreement with changes as they progress throughout the job. I guess one thing that I didn't touch on, and it's not really written there, but as far as having logs and project records, we always recommend that there's a change order log, an allowance log, and a contingency log. Sometimes contractors will roll that all up into one, which is fine, as long as they're clearly specifying which belongs to which. For allowance and contingency specifically, it's very critical that you understand, this is the top line number of what we started with, and here's where we've spent our money. Contracts typically have terms about any savings related to allowance and contingency. And so making sure that you have a clear understanding of where that money's been spent, what that includes, whether that's, additional overhead and profit, or is that just direct cost? What are the approval requirements if we're going above the contingency amount or above the allowance amount? All of those things should be tracked within a log for ease of use, but also when you're reconciling at the end of the job and trying to understand if there's any projected savings, you can clearly identify where that may exist. Insurance and bonds. So I actually worked for a national construction manager in their internal audit function. And so I learned a lot about insurance and bonds that maybe I didn't know just from the consulting lens. So it is often a profit center for contractors. Typically, contractors will have an overarching like GL policy or workers' comp policy, and they will just allocate out to their different jobs. That allocation is based on the amount of active projects that they have ongoing, so that it really doesn't become an operating expense for them, but rather, a project cost that they're passing through to owners. While that makes sense from, a construction manager side, on the owner side, you just want to pay for the actual cost of whatever the insurance was. You don't want to pay for overhead costs or operating expenses related to them as an organization. And typically you just want to pay either a set percentage, or you just want to say, this is what it costs for the policy specific to my job. That's what I want to pay. So oftentimes contracts will have a stipulated rate within them, or they will be at cost, which is preferred. Common insurances, commercial, umbrella, workers' comp, auto, builder's risk. Like I said, the allocation methodology, it may be flawed, and you really may end up covering insurances that aren't specific to your facility. So I've seen projects where you're paying for like executive risk. So if something happens to their CFO, they've got insurance to cover that. Or cybersecurity attacks or incidents, you're paying for that. Or inland marine insurance when your project is in Kansas and you're not on the water. Like I've seen all of these things actually happen in reality. The last couple of items, so payment and performance bonds, I will talk about with SubGuard. So SubGuard is utilized in lieu of payment and performance bonds. If you have a subcontractor that defaults on the job, it allows you to continue on with the work without, a stoppage. The carrier will, a new contractor will be assigned to take over the existing sub's work, and it really helps with the continuation of work, basically. So we're seeing this, much more commonly, which has its advantages and disadvantages. But what we have seen over time is that the rate for that is increasing. So typically SubGuard is charged from, 1.1 to anywhere from 1.5%, which is very high. So when we look at it from an audit perspective, and when we're reviewing terms in a construction contract, we're really focusing on what does it specify as far as who's allowed in that insurance program, and what are the controls around that. So from a control standpoint, looking at it, we want to know, what does the policy say about who can be enrolled and who cannot be enrolled? Typically there's language about, contracts under value X are automatically excluded. And then you want to know from an enrollment standpoint, who is the contractor saying is enrolled in this program and who is not. Anyone who's not would be covered under a bond, and anybody who's enrolled, you should make sure that the percentage they're applying is accurate and that it's actually based on the total contract value for the enrolled subs. OSIP and CSIP are kind of similar in that way. So they typically cover general liability, some form of umbrella / excess, and workers' comp. Very similar, making sure that those who are enrolled within the program are over here, those who are excluded are over here, and they are only paying costs related to the total contract value for those who are enrolled. And there's a lot of documentation, policies, policy declaration pages, enrollment logs that you get from the insurance provider, as well as invoices that you can review kind of on the back end to make sure that you're getting that assurance. Polling question number 4.
All right, thank you. So the last polling question is, which of the following project cost types are the most challenging for your organization? Materials, fee, subcontractors, equipment, labor, insurance. There's all of the above and none of the above. And this is a long list, so you may have to enlarge the slide area to see the submit button for this one. And while you're responding, some people have been asking for a recording of this webcast, and we will be sending that out tomorrow via email along with the slides. So please keep a lookout for that email. All right, here you go.
Okay. All of the above, that makes total sense. Subcontractors also make sense, as that makes up the bulk of your project charges. I think the challenge with each of these areas is very specific. Having a well-written contract can help you in any of these areas. But these results are not at all surprising, except for the none of the above. I'm curious about those.
I think we have some fellow construction auditors out there. All right. So right to audit clause, this is a clause that you can apply to basically any contract type. We've also seen it within lump sum agreements or CMAR delivery methodologies, GMP contract types. So the right to audit clause is a generic language that is readily available in the AIA, or you can Google it, for example. And all this does is allows you to obtain all necessary information for you to validate billings. Generally, there's no limit on requests or your ability to obtain the information, so that when you say, yeah, we've received this billing, you're able to get the invoice, the proof of payment, the job cost reporting from the system of record, anything you would need within reason to say, hey, yeah, we were provided this billing. It is fully substantiated and compliant with the contract terms. Generally, we like this documentation available monthly when contractors submit. We often hear that it's a major burden to provide that level of detail on a monthly basis. However, for guarantee maximum price, that's what contractors are signing up for. So we recommend monthly. We have projects that are 500 million, $1 billion plus, and we get that level of information monthly. And that level of information is important because you can detect early on issues. And what we tell everyone, it's very easy to talk to someone about a $500 or $50, $5,000 disconnect. When you start adding zeros, the equation gets more complicated. So having the right to audit clause, getting the information fully substantiated, early stages, we find most contractors, they want to be compliant. They're not looking to do anything outside the contract terms, but a lot of contracts have gray areas, and having the right to audit clause plus that proactive approach on getting the documentation, identifying risk early on, supporting the team reach compliance so that when you get to the end of the project, you're not worried about, for example, major audit findings. You're more focused on transitioning the project from construction to operations. So I think your main takeaway here for projects that are larger, really consider utilizing the guarantee maximum price contract with the right to audit clause, and then making sure your cost of work definitions are defined, clarified, in engaging legal accounting firm to making sure that that it's in line with best practices. All right, we won't go through all these, and you guys will get the slide deck, I think, afterwards, or you'll be able to download it. So what we did here is we provided kind of common contract cost types and then common controls to detect early and mitigate risk. For example, labor overcharges. You'll want to make sure you have a clear understanding if it's actual costs or rates. You'll want to get the timekeeping documentation, preferably monthly, as early as possible, making sure that the rates are consistent with your contract terms, that the time cards or proof of payment are consistent with what's being performed on site, etc. So we hope you find this table helpful in terms of, hey, we got a project, how can we evaluate the controls we have in place? And I think this is a pretty easy playbook that if you're in internal audit or accounting and you don't know construction, for example, you can go work with your facilities team saying, hey, we know there's labor on the project, for example. How do we know that we're not getting overcharged? Can I see timekeeping documentation, et cetera, so that we aren't paying more than we should? Okay, and I think I pass it back to you on this one, Charnee.
Yeah, so on this slide, we just wanted to highlight the benefit of construction audits and when is the best time to kind of perform them, whether you're doing it internally or hiring, an external consultant to assist you with that. So we always say audit early, audit often. There is no stage at which you cannot perform an audit unless, the right to audit clause specifies a time period after which the books are closed. But we always like to get in as early as possible, making sure that, in addition to your legal counsel, you have somebody who's helping you review your construction contract. From a controls standpoint, you could do, monthly payment application and change order reviews, or if you just want to do interim and closeout audits, that's certainly an option as well. Audits cover everything from, charges on the job to schedule to scope creep, changes, and then, ultimately the operations and project delivery to make sure that you're getting what you paid for, essentially. And then performing an audit, like we said, it helps obviously with management of costs. It can help from that stakeholder perception that we were discussing earlier, and then really just improve your, internal controls surrounding construction projects so that you can kind of take that with you as you move forward throughout the life of your organization or your program. So moving forward, conduct construction project and program risk assessments. We think that that's a great tool to have. Just identifying key areas, of risk, what those risks may be, and then determining, if there's a way that your health organization can combat or mitigate those risks. Make sure that you have the right staffing structure and the right qualified personnel to help manage your construction project internally. We find that, working in partnership with your contractors and having individuals who have, the right level of experience is also critical. Develop, if you don't have already, policies, procedures, and controls for managing construction projects. That's everything from billings to changes to the capital improvement plan process and how that is developed. If you have internal audit, or if you are an internal auditor yourself in your organization, make sure that construction audits make their way onto your audit plan, and that you focus on, expenditures, contract compliance, and then if you have any funding source requirements, like for bonds or grants, and then seek help, wherever you need it. Construction auditors and construction advisory firms are out there. We do 120 plus of these types of reviews on an annual basis. So we're readily available to help support you. So questions. We only have a couple of minutes left. Amy, how much time do you need for your wrap up?
You can do a couple minutes worth of questions and then I'll wrap it up quickly.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So as far as questions, so what are your thoughts about the construction manager at risk contract relationships? Stephen, do you want me to? I mean, I think from a contracting standpoint, CMARs are great. I think that the shared risk aspect of that and having a construction manager who's working in partnership with you is great. I think it helps from a cost perspective, right? Because everybody is benefiting if the project is successfully completed, on time and on budget. There's less errors or rifts in communication, so I think that's great. On the risk side of it, I think if something does go wrong, if there's a claim, if there's a lien, because of the nature of the owner with the construction manager together, there's kind of like that single point of failure, so to speak. So that definitely adds an element of risk to the process. Some of our clients have been surprised that GMP language allowed for contractors to increase their contract amount based on the increase in transportation costs. How do you manage that? I think one of the ways that we've seen that effectively done is by including an allowance within the contract value and having terms that, the allowance is not to be exceeded. If you go above stated allowance related to any type of escalation costs, that will be the responsibility of the contractor. I know we have a lot of great questions here, and we will answer everybody. I think that we get the questions after the webcast is complete. So we'll be sure to reach out with responses, and I'll let Amy close us out.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Steve and Charnee, for a really great presentation. It is too bad that we're out of time. To our audience, if you have further questions or comments, please reach out to us and we would be happy to continue the conversation. You can drop a note in the Q&A window or reach out to our presenters directly. Their contact information is in your console as well as in the slide deck, which you can download now from the handouts window. That slide deck will also have some additional slides that go into more detail on our healthcare consulting services. I also want to point out that our annual healthcare conference will be in Las Vegas this November, and registration is open. You can click the image in the upper right-hand corner of your console to be taken to more information. And then if you met all CPE requirements, your certificate is available to download now in the CPE progress window. A copy will be emailed within 2 weeks if you have difficulty downloading it now. And then finally, here's a link to a survey for today's presentation. Your feedback is appreciated. And thanks again for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.